Good morning. You're listening to the BLAINESWORLD show, heard here on 103.7 on the dial on WPVM LP in Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen online at WPVM's Facebook page. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week we focus on the Asheville theater scene as well as on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my first two guests, and they are Deb Love and Judith, pronunciation? Loniak, I'm sorry. And they're both volunteers with an organization called HOHS, and that stands for what, guys?
Heart of Horse Sense.
Okay, Heart of Horse Sense. And before we talk about what Heart of Horse Sense is, I should mention that Judith is a professional photographer. She's also a New Thought chaplain and 100% service-connected disabled Navy veteran. She has a service dog, Dixie, for PTSD from her service in the Navy, and she's also active in this organization we'll be talking about. Deb Love is her closest friend and is the person who introduced her to Horse Sense, which is how she came to be an Equine therapy client. Judith is no longer, I love that, you're no longer terrified of horses. Were you terrified of horses at one time?
I was terrified of horses.
Were you really?
Yeah, they're so big.
Was there anything as a kid that made you terrified of horses?
Well, I actually went horseback riding with some people when I was in high school, and they put me on this huge horse, and it started galloping but what it was doing was it was throwing its head back, and it was throwing green mucus all over me.
Oh, lovely.
I swear to God. So ever since then, and plus they're so big, they scared me.
Well, you know, I can relate. I'll just tell the story quickly. You may have heard it. That I used to be terrified of horses. Cynthia once got me this, lesson for horses, and she put me on this horse. I'm going fine, and all of a sudden, same thing too. It starts screaming and bucking all over the place, and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. And finally, Cynthia got the manager of Walmart to unplug the. And it was traumatic, Deb. You know, it's the same thing Judith did. So that's my one horseback riding story. So, Deb, talk about you. Were you always a fan of horses, or how did you get involved in this whole thing?
You know, I was around horses a little bit as a child, but not very much. And I'd gone on a couple of trail rides in my early 20s, but that was about it. I lived in California in a metropolis of concrete. And so once I moved to Asheville, I kept crossing paths with horses, and I was drawn to them. And so I stopped being afraid of them myself and I was intrigued. So I decided to go check out Horse Sense. And I started volunteering on Saturday mornings. And then I volunteered with the children's program. And then I told them I was a veteran. And so I started taking advantage of veterans programs. And then, 4 years later, I own 2 horses and I board them there. And I have volunteered to do this position. It's a staff position, but I do it as a volunteer.
And talk about Horse Sense, because until Judith told me about it, I think, Judith, to your credit, I was just reading Facebook one day and I saw you with a whole bunch of horses and talking about Horse Sense. I never heard about it. So what is Horse Sense all about? Deb?
Horse Sense, actually, it's unique because a lot of the horses that they have there have also been trauma survivors. So there are rescue horses, and then the people that get therapy have also had some type of either neglect or trauma. And so it's an at-risk horse, at-risk person. They get together and you have a therapist and also an equine specialist. So you have a person who specializes in humans, and then you have another person who specializes in horse behavior, and you have both those people in session. And one person's watching the horse, one person's watching the human. And the beautiful thing about it is that you don't have to talk about your trauma like you do in talk therapy. It's an experiential thing, and it helps build trust. It helps build relationships and a partnership with the horse. And it just helps carry it outside of the arena with other humans.
Now, when the person is getting therapy, the human's getting therapy, is the horse sitting there, or are they on the horse, or are they riding the horse? What happens?
What's really beautiful, Blaine, is that the client usually gets to pick the horses they want to work with. So they got about 30 horses, and they have some that are their staff horses. And so you get to go around and pick which ones are the working horses that you want to do your session with. And oftentimes the horse has a very similar traumatic event that the human had. These are things you just can't make up. An example, I met a horse named Sergeant Gus, and they didn't tell me his name. I just felt drawn to him. Come to find out, he was retired from the Asheville Police Department because he had a bone-on-bone injury in his leg. And I was a sergeant. I was a staff sergeant in the Army. And I later became a nurse, and I had to retire from nursing because of bone-on-bone injury in my back. So I felt like, wow, I have something in common with Sergeant Gus, you know, and that was the first horse I was drawn to.
And so talk about with Sergeant Gus. So you're in therapy with Sergeant Gus. Are you, like I said, are you riding Sergeant Gus or
No.
just talking with him?
No, actually, I met Sergeant Gus at one of the orientations, which is open to the public, and they have those periodically. But no, riding, we do have riding, but it's not the number one thing that happens. Horses help with regulation because with trauma, you become dysregulated, and rhythmic riding kind of helps get you regulated. A lot of times children will end up on horseback before adults will. It just depends. Some people are on horseback sooner. A lot of it's on the ground though. It's groundwork. You're learning skills like setting boundaries and watching body language of the horse and paying attention to your own breathing. And like for myself, I didn't even know I had anxiety until I tried to make sure I was calm for the horse because I was a little afraid when I first went too.
And Judith, we'll talk also about you then, and I thank you for willing to be on the show with us, talk a little bit about how you, first of all, how did you first hear about horse sense?
Well, Deb.
You're right.
And I finally said, okay, I'll go check it out. But I was terrified of horses. So I went to what they call Fallen Friday in the military. There's a phrase when everybody comes to the line to, you know, as troops or as I'm a sailor. So they say fall in. So it's Fallen Friday and everybody gets together with the horses. So they brought us into the barn, and there were these horses and they were huge. And I was not going near them. But then there were these little horses. They're about my height, probably taller, I'm sure. And that horse came to me. And it took me a little bit, but they don't force you into be around the horse. It's what works for you. And so this horse and we just kind of connected. And I finally was able to enter the arena with this horse. Now, mind you, there's all these horses around, and I'm kind of looking around like there's horses that are like 6 feet high and all this other stuff. But horse sense is very geared into how you are reacting, and they're very intuitive about if your fear is coming up and stuff like that. So I decided to get into equine therapy with this therapist, and she's been wonderful. She's been very intuitive, and I've learned how what's going on inside of me is also sometimes going on with the horse at the same time.
I was going to ask that because Deb alluded to it, the fact that, you know, it's kind of a partnership between you and the horse. But so do you come across horses that do have problems or have had trauma, and how do you find out about that, or how do you know about that?
So a lot of the horses that they end up with, they rescue the horses and they actually rehabilitate them, and they work with Hope for Horses. And so one of the things, we even have a group called the Wild Bunch, and it's a group of veterans, and we work with horses that are newer and they don't have the skills yet that they need to be around other people. And we help. That's how I adopted my first horse, is what he was part of the Wild Bunch. He was a stallion that they brought in. It had been gelded, and I fell in love with him. And so I asked if I could adopt him when it was time for him to be adopted. And so, now what was your question again?
No, about the same token, Judith was talking about, you know, people having problems, but you were saying about horses having problems. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So are you taught, or is there a training process for people to work with horses that have problems?
Yes, we use a program called Pirelli, which is partnering with the horse. You're a partner. You're not over them, telling them and making them do things. You work together as you give them a choice and you let them think and solve problems for themselves. They solve a puzzle. So when they learn what you want, then you work together with each other, and it helps you learn how to be a better partner with other relationships as well. But Richard Knapp is the farm manager, and he's Shannon's husband, and he teaches natural horsemanship on the farm. And they only charge $10, and that's for the horse. And so you can show up for an hour, have your own horse, learn how to do some Pirelli, because all the horses communicate that way. So every horse on the farm has been trained with Pirelli, and they are partners. They're safe to be around. And the ones who are not, they're in a different place, not around the public.
Give an example of, you said horses solving problems. It's kind of neat. Give an example.
Well, I have a horse named Major who's very, very pushy, and I guess sometimes I'm pushy. So he's and he gets right up in your face, no boundary. And I try to work with him to back him up, he wants me to feed him all the time. He's trying to he checks my pockets. Is there anything in there, So I have to work with him to stay out of my, you want a 3 feet safe spot, just like you would with a human. So I want him to back up and respect my space.
Well, you raised a good point too, that this is a skill that, humans be helpful to, outside of the horse, working with the horses. So I'm thinking, Judith, maybe I could do this and learn how to use it with my wife. Maybe I can get some useful skills here for what you call it. I like it. We were talking about the fact that you call it, what is it, equine assisted psychotherapy?
Yes.
What is that, Judith?
Well, it's actual therapy with a therapist.
Right.
Only the horse is in the room with you, and
also an equine assistant.
And an equine specialist. And I work with Rachel and Anna, and they have been incredible. Actually, my very first visit with Rachel, she picked up stuff about me that I wasn't sharing, and I was feeling pretty suicidal at that time. And she looked at me and she said, "You're feeling suicidal, aren't you?" I'm like, "Whoa!" But she's worked so much with the horses and so much with people that she sees the way the horse is reacting and the way me as the human is reacting, and she helps me to come to terms with stuff that's going on that I didn't even sometimes know was going on. And one thing I've really learned is that in the Navy, I was being investigated for being gay. And so that it's known as military sexual trauma. So what happened with that is that you don't have choice in that kind of thing. So that's why when you get into equine therapy, that's why it's very important that the horses have choice. They have to have choice. So you don't just walk up to the horse and put your hands on them. You kind of let them fill you out and make sure that they decide what they want to do. And so it's taught me how to understand that I do have choices, and that I can make those choices.
So you are referring to it. So it helps you not only in terms of when you're with the horses, but outside of all the other cool stuff you do. And at the same token that Judith is saying, I'm just curious, do the horses get trained as well? In other words, before they will be assigned to a client, do they get some sort of training?
They certainly do. They get many, many hours of one-on-one training with people who are certified in Pirelli. Most of the staff is certified in Pirelli, and the horses get many hours of training before they're ever with the public.
And what kind of training is it?
Well, Pirelli it's about the horse. We're asking them to move their front quarters and their hind quarters and back up, and we do things like have them go through obstacles and back them into the stalls. We do all kinds of stuff with them. They can do figure eights. They can walk up on a platform. We horses very much by nature are very panicaholics and claustrophobics, and they freak out. You know, most of them are they're prey animals, so they're on guard all the time. So we learn how to be with the horses, not trigger them, and if they are triggered, we don't panic. Only one person gets to panic, or one of us. It's not. You know, the horse panics, I don't need to panic too. You know, so we really learn to keep our head and to stay focused and be present with ourselves and with the horse, because it's very important, because you got a 1,200-pound animal that can just crush you into the wall or something if you're not paying attention.
You raise a good point, because I always wondered about horses. You would think they would be claustrophobic, you know, that in terms of they're in these little stalls a long time, and that must, you know, be quite an experience for a horse to, you know, go through, or have to get used to it at some point in time. Judith, do you ever want to get to a point where you're one of these trainers, or do you aspire to go become from a volunteer going in the next step?
Yeah, I think so. Right now, I'm not volunteering because I'm in equine therapy, and when you're in equine therapy, that's what you do. Volunteering is really not really going to work, because when you're in a volunteer position, it may trigger something. And if you're there and something is triggered, the therapist might not be there to help you through that. So therefore, I'm focusing on myself right now. And they have the same 2 horses whenever I go, Spice and Pumpkin. And I started working more with Pumpkin. And now I've been working more with Spice. We're connecting more than I am with the first horse that I was working with. But they're both small horses. And I've, you know, and that's helped me to be more comfortable with them.
Now, will you eventually graduate to working with larger horses, or?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know. I'm not worried about that.
Yeah.
That's not an issue. That's not even a thing.
Now, how long, Deb, does the process last? Be it with Judith or anybody else? Is this a year process? Is this a 5-year process?
Never know.
It's based on each individual. Sometimes you might go 12 sessions, you might go 13 or something. We also have immersive retreats on the farm. You know, it's 115 acres. It's beautiful, pristine property with the labyrinth, and there's trails to walk on and walk the horses on. So that's one of the experiential things you can do, is go to one of the immersion retreats where everything's provided, your meals, and you don't lift a finger and do anything but get nurtured and cared for at those retreats. And it's a great time to have other veterans around and have the camaraderie. We also have Fall In Friday, and you can go once a week, every week, as long as Fall In Friday's going, you can go every week for that. And then the Wild Bunch is by invitation only, by people who are more, you know, comfortable around horses, to work with the ones who need the training.
I just want to say, if I may, my mother died on New Year's Eve from COVID in New Jersey. And I have been so well cared for with my therapist and my horses because through this, and it's, you know, starting to bring stuff up now. So she is always available for me if I need her, even more than once a week or whatever.
Now, talk about then the process. So I think you mentioned you're located where again, Deb?
It's in Marshall.
Okay.
They're actually at 7041 Meadowstown Road.
Okay. We'll come back to it again, but if people want to find out more about horse sense, best bet is do what?
You can go to the website, which is heartofhorsesense.org. And there's also another website, which is the for-profit part of the business, and that is Horse Sense of the Carolinas. But you'll get good information from each one. You want the phone number?
No, just I think we'll have it. Just once again, the website. Then I want to ask you about what you just said. So the 2 websites are what, Deb?
One is heartofhorsesense.org, right, and the other one is Horse Sense of the Carolinas. .org.
Now, you mentioned, I think I'm getting the difference. So there's a nonprofit part of this, and there's also a profit part of it. What's the difference? What's the difference between the 2?
Well, the for-profit one is one that people can afford to go to therapy. Sometimes they have scholarships available, but the nonprofit, it actually educates people, not just individuals, but businesses. they actually help to train other people to do the equine therapy, and they fund them as well. So they have lots of grant money that they use to fund other businesses, and they teach their business plan and model to other organizations. Horse Sense is actually internationally known, and they're one of the top in the world. And so they're really, really good at what they do. So they teach it to other organizations and they fund them. So that's what Heart does that's different.
So in the case you were talking before about people coming in for therapy, but the profit structure, they can also come in for therapy, but they pay for they pay full fare for the therapy? Is that
Well, there are scholarships available,
Right.
and they do take insurance as well. So they do get, you can bill, it can be billed to insurance, or you can apply for a scholarship. My spouse got a scholarship and she went to 13 sessions, and it really did help her quite a lot. And some people don't even go to the individual therapy. They may do groups instead.
And veterans,
It's free for
yeah,
veterans.
free for veterans. So I'm
Everything-
not charged for any of my care.
Yeah, all of the things through Heart of Horse Sense, the nonprofit, are absolutely free.
Now, you mentioned the two of you are involved with working with veterans, but there's also, what other kinds of people do you work with at Heart Sense, or does Heart Sense work at?
Every kind of person, because pretty much everybody has had some type of trauma. You don't have to be a veteran to have PTSD.
Sure.
People process different things different ways. So a sudden death in the family, or, it doesn't have to be a violent crime to be traumatic. It could be a parent's divorce, or just being food insecure. I mean, there's just so many different things that Horse Sense does in the community to help children and sex trafficking victims. They're pretty much helping lots of different types of people.
Now, does Horse Sense seek out volunteers to do sort of what you and you
Absolutely.
do? And
We
how
have-
does- yeah.
We have a Facebook page that's Horse Sense volunteers, and you can actually you can go on the Heart of Horse Sense website as well, and it'll tell you when you have to fill out paperwork, and you have to sign a waiver or release, and then you can learn about the orientations. Used to be in person, now they're online, and then you fill out paperwork, send it in, then you come for a tour and a demonstration, and then you can start volunteering. And you learn how to care for the animals when you're there on Saturdays, and you do chores for an hour and a half of chores and an hour and a half of horse time.
And talk a little bit about how you got involved in that. So how did you hear about it initially?
I had another friend of mine, actually Cheryl Ward.
Mhm.
She went to the same spiritual center that I did, and she was going and talking about it. And so I wanted to go check it out. And it's funny because me and my friend Margot drove out there, and we got there on the wrong Saturday. And like, it took me 2 more years to get there again, So like 7 years ago, I was thinking about it. I'm not in a big hurry for change. But anyway, I finally made it out like 2 years later. And then once I got, just the drive out there is so relaxing. Getting on the property is so, so peaceful. And just putting your hands on the horses, it just helps calm me down, for one. And learning about the horses and their issues. And I wanted to tell you, Blaine, real quickly about a horse that we recently lost on the farm, who was 38 years old. His name was Lucky, and he was all the children's favorite horse. Everybody loved Lucky. He was everybody's favorite.
Mhm.
He's named Lucky because hikers were hiking and they found a whole herd of dead horses, and he was the only one left. They had starved. And so Lucky was the only one left. And there are so many stories about horses like that come to Horse Sense and end up being therapists for other people. So.
And talk about how horses wind up at Horse Sense. So where do they come from?
They're rescue animals. They get seized sometimes for neglect and abuse. Sometimes people will go through a divorce and they get mad at each other and they stop feeding the horses, and they're starving, and almost somebody calls animal control, and Hope for Horses will get them. And then sometimes, they go out and they adopt these horses. They have Pumpkin and Spice, the ones that Judith works with. They're small halflingers, and they were starved so much when they came. We couldn't tell if they were pregnant or not because they were so swollen in their bellies from malnutrition. And now they're like the most beautiful horses. And then there was one lady who had a horse who she raised it up like a dog, and she didn't know you couldn't do that. And then the horse got bigger and bigger, and then it chased her up a tree, and she was up there with a pitchfork, you couldn't handle it. So they went and got this horse, and they adopted it, and they trained it, and they worked with it. One of the horses over there used to belong to Andy McDowell, And she retired it. It was a hunter and jumper. His name is Hook. And he's there. He was at the Biltmore, and now he's been at Horse Sense for years, and he's retired. They have a herd called the Wise Ones, and they're the retired horses, and they don't have to work anymore, and they just live out their days and get well cared for.
And they don't all stay in stalls. A lot of them are their herds.
They only feed them in stalls sometimes.
Right.
They only go in a stall unless if they're sick. They all have free range. They're out.
Nice.
They have coverings to go under and stay out of the wind and rain and so forth. And if it's cold weather, they can put them in stalls and stuff, but they don't keep them in stalls all the time.
Do any horses come from either the military or the police?
Yeah, they had a police, Sergeant Gus came from the Asheville Police Department. He was
really?
retired. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know about any military horses.
Now, people have horses themselves. Does Horse Sense take volunteer horses, or can you give your horse to Horse Sense?
They are full at the moment right now. There's a couple of people that board horses there, and you just pay to board your horse like you would at any other boarding facility, and it works well for me because I'm there all the time anyway.
Well, your story is kind of an interesting one. So you were a volunteer, and then you saw two horses at Horse Sense, and you chose to, what was it, adopt them, or explain that process?
Well, Braveheart had been a former stallion who used to break out of the pen all the time, and the owners couldn't contain him, and they put a big chain around his neck, bicycle chain, and he's got a big scar all the way around his neck, and he's terrified of everything. These big, beautiful horse, but terrified. And he came in, and the Wild Bunch was a group of veterans. We were working with some of the horses who needed to be worked with and have human contact, and I actually fell in love with him, and at first I was afraid of him because his eyes were giant. He was so scared. He had these big old bugged out eyes, and his head was always high, and he was terrified. And now he walks around with his head way down low, and he likes children, and he still has his moments when he gets scared easily, but he's a whole different horse now. You can touch him, and he knows you're not hurting him. Before, he was afraid every time somebody touched him, they were going to hurt him. And so when he came up for adoption, and I asked Richard if I could adopt him and board him there. And so he said, "It's not up to me, it's up to Hope for Horses." So I got on the phone and I called and I asked him, and I got to adopt him on Veterans Day 2 years ago.
That's pretty cool, though. That.
Yeah.
I guess you fell in love with the horse, and then you adopt him.
I did.
And so, is that like something that happens often, that other people are volunteers and they eventually adopt horses?
Not really. I think I might be the first one to do that. I know a man who used to work there who actually bought a horse, and then some of the staff have their own horses there, and they keep them there. But I think I was the first one that actually asked if I could adopt one of them. And I had to go, it wasn't an easy process because I had to go through a lot of training with horsemanship to work with this horse because he is special. And it helped me be more confident in my skills. And I still have a long way to go. I'm still learning. It's a lifelong process of learning. And then the second horse that I brought him to be a companion for Braveheart because he was so scared all the time. And so this other horse, he's a wonderful horse that I knew. He lived in a field near where I live now. And I asked his owner if I could have him, and he said yes. He had had a stroke. And so now I have Braveheart and Major.
A final question for both of you. I'll start off with Judith. What's your favorite thing about Horse Sense?
When I walk on the property, when I just get to the property, the feeling of peace that you get, because you just look out and there's this view of the mountains and fields and horses. It's just amazing how peaceful it is there. And with that peace, I'm able to kind of figure out what's really going on because I don't have all the other noise in my head. It helps to quiet that a little bit.
Very nice. Same thing. Yeah.
Just the staff and everything is just, I'm grateful for my bestie here for bringing me there.
And same thing too, Deb. What do you like best about Horse Sense?
I like being on the property, and I like just being with the horses. Mm-hmm. And the staff is wonderful too. The whole herd, they're wonderful people. It's like being a part of something much bigger than yourself. And it feels like doing the job that I'm doing there. I feel like I have purpose. And it just feels, I could be there. I could spend, my wife would get upset, but I could just spend every day, all day there.
And I like how you described it, the whole herd of, you're not talking about the horses,
Yeah.
you're talking about the people.
Yeah.
And once again, if you can, Deb, please, contact information for Horse Sense.
It is heartofhorsesense.org. And there's also another website, horsesenseofthecarolinas.com.
My Facebook page.
And there's Facebook, there's 2 Facebook pages. It's Western North Carolina Horseplay, and that's one. Wait a minute, it's Veterans Horseplay. And there's also, it's Heart of Horse Sense Facebook page and Veterans Horseplay WNC.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you both for being my guests on this first half hour on the Blaine's World Show. Judith, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for helping me set this up.
Thanks.
And we're impressed with you guys. Thanks a lot for coming on board. And hopefully, Judith, I'll see you sometime in the next couple of years.
I hope so.
It's been too
Miss
long.
you.
Okay, guys, be well.
Thanks, Blake.
Thanks again. Okay.
Bye.
And as we have our next guest come on board, I'll just make a general announcement or two as we look for Lorraine and see if we can get our second guest. There she is. And welcome aboard, Lorraine. I should just mention that WPVM's mission is to foster community through programming that cultivates dialogue to inform and entertain. The station provides a medium for artists, businesses, community leaders, and nonprofits to share their voice on live radio. Listeners are invited to help support WPVM's mission by making a tax-deductible contribution. They can do so by going to the website, wpvmfm.org, and looking at the donate option on the upper right-hand side. My next guest is a friend of mine, longtime friend, Lorraine Allen, who is a business life coach and started her own firm. Is it Breakthrough Living Now? Is that the name of it? The name of the firm? And you can wave, first of all, Lorraine, to all your fans and friends in Facebook world. So if you're watching, that's Lorraine Allen. Lorraine Allen has 30 years business consulting. She's a lifelong working with lifelong trauma survivors who retired into her own practice, helping others and business owners break free and break through personal obstacles. And Lorraine, I should mention, like I said, that we've known each other for a few years here. And did you always know, where did you grow up as a kid? Again, where did you grow up?
I grew up just south of Philadelphia in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, and Ridley Township for a long time. And then I moved to New Jersey about 30 years ago.
And when you were a kid, did you always know you wanted to be this guru working with businesses? What got you into that? What got you into that?
Honestly, it was just natural. I wanted to be an artist. I went to school for art, but I worked in business and I was good at it, good at management and running things. And I was able to transition from one business to, another one and so forth. And ultimately I was in New Jersey and applied for this job to help businesses. And it brought my travel experience together in a weird way to where I was. And that started. I just started meeting businesses one by one and helped them in 1991.
That's probably when I first met you at the Small Business Development Center.
Small Business Development Center, right? I run my own business. I have my own art studio. I do my own graphic before that, but right when I really started helping businesses was 1991.
And if ever there was a perfect job for you, I thought that was the perfect job for you. I mean, you were just so good at it, and more importantly, you seemed to really enjoy it, though, did you?
Loved it.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about what you did in that, and then we'll transition it to what you do now. But what was your job at the Small Business Center?
I was the regional director, the assistant first, and then I became a regional director. And what we do is we're government funded and provide management and technical assistance to existing and startup companies. Essentially what it is they have a challenge or an opportunity, they come to us. We try and help them, or we have consultants like you who can help them, like you were marketing. So maybe the business needed help in that. We would work with them and focus on their situation and what their needs were. And so we counseled them to help them get from here to there.
And what's so cool is that I'm still in contact with one of my clients, Bob Giaquinto Shoe Repair. And I'm also in contact with, give a shout out to Herb Spiegel, who was head of the center. And it was just such a great facility, that all the stuff you did, for so many years. and so many clients you helped, and just a really fantastic experience. Was it hard for you to walk away?
Yes, yes. I had a lot of freedom to express. That was really inspired by Herb, to try. And you taught me creativity. So, yes, leaving the administration, not so much. But working with the businesses, fortunately, I still counsel for them, but independently. But yes, that part was because it was a gift. It was a treasure that I had a privilege to work with the businesses and actually helping the community as well. It was a gift.
So talk about what happened then. You were telling me off the air that I guess 2020 rolled around, and timing is in fact everything. What happened then that got you away from Small Business Center to now starting your own venture?
Well, it was time for me to leave. You get your Forrest Gump moment, and when you've just given all that you can. So I retired in January 2020, but slide right into the pandemic. And so that kind of and I really planned on doing a lot of traveling, but a lot of my focus at that time was to do that. And then I wanted to help people general, but I knew the business community and help the businesses on their personal side. Because a lot of times these people would come to my, for counsel and sit at my desk, and they had a lot of issues that, your grief and loss or things that they were dealing with, or, as a result of, like we're talking trauma earlier, of early trauma, and it still affects their behaviors, and they get stuck and they don't know why. And I have a lot of experience with that. So I wanted to really look at the whole business. And I could help the owner too, with their building, with their business as well. So I decided to go into that.
In terms of helping people, I think that's where I got the idea to have you as guests on the show, because, we used to be close when I was in New Jersey and, haven't seen each other for a while. But then I started seeing you on Facebook, and you're writing this blog, which I think you're doing a fantastic job with. And talk a little bit about that, because at least when I've seen, I think do a better job than most people. Talk about the idea behind the blog and then what you're doing with the blog.
Well, it's called Breakthrough Living Now on Facebook, Breakthrough Living Now. And I started it because I noticed over the years trying to help myself through, my own emotional wellness, is that a lot of times things happen, or there's big changes, or we see a lot of the posters, the inspiration posters, and to do that. But okay, I see it for a second, but then what? And I really wanted to just show how minor, small changes, really little, and applying and with a little awareness of ourselves, make a whole big difference in our perspective. And so I would just give a challenge, share my little story part of it, and then, something that they could do. Like I said, one of them, say my name. All right, if you go to, everywhere you go in your restaurant or the supermarket or other places, people have name tags. Well, they don't need their name tags just for each other in the store. It's really wonderful when they're recognized. And if you said, well, have a good day, Jameson, or Jackie, hi, Jackie, thanks so much for your help. And it really makes a difference, because a lot of times we want to be seen or heard, and the way to do it is to start doing it. So breakthrough is just teeny ways, all add up to make a difference in yours and other people's lives.
And talk a little bit more about that, because it's such a great point in terms of, so you're on the business. And so the breakthrough is what? Recognizing other people by their name and getting in touch with them?
Well, that's an example. That's just one example. I started out 52 simple ways to break through living.
By the way, is this going to be, let me stop you a second. This is going to be your book then? Are we getting working on the book?
Well, you're just too smart.
Yeah, no, I'm saying what a perfect, book.
Ultimately, it serves multiple purposes, right? But to give eye, but it just so that people, it's a lot of times we feed them too much to do at one time, and especially now we're so distracted in so many different ways that small doses, small little nibbles make a big difference.
Well, I think the other advantage to it, and you kind of helped me recognize this when I was a client, when I was a consultant for you, is that sometimes I'd have a tendency to overwhelm people. You know, in other words, you're a small business, or you're running a small business, and you want help, and you need 73 things simultaneously. And your point, I think, is a good one. It can sometimes, not sometimes, it oftentimes can be overwhelming. So as opposed to if you break into a small chunk, or one chunk a week or something, you have a better chance of succeeding with it.
Well, not only that, I'm terrible. You give me something and I'm not, honestly, I'm lucky if I last, a few days to a week, let alone a month, you know what I mean? But if I try it and wear it on and use it, then it becomes imprinted. And when you start, the more you understand just the mechanical side of the way we think, then it becomes imprinted, and then it becomes a little bit more familiar. And then it becomes more useful, because me looking at doing a whole month of something, it's like, it's just not happening.
Well, and studies show that if you get into the habit of doing something for at least 3 weeks, you have a chance of doing it. But to just get started and not being overwhelmed by it is quite a difficult thing to do. Talk about some of the other stuff you do too. I know you were telling me off the air, I've never worked with you on this, but EFT I'm familiar with. And so you also incorporate, I guess, what's the term in it? It's EFT and...
Well, faster EFT
is
actually, and what we were talking about is eutaptics, which is actually the learning, the education of it, who was started by a remarkable man, Robert Smith. And it is, a lot of people are familiar with tapping, EFT, emotional freedom technique, but this is faster. And there's very important to make the distinction. Faster EFT, emotional feeling transformation. And what it is Robert has combined the elements of neuro-linguistic programming. People know it as NLP, tapping, EFT, be set free fast, but also a little bit of hypnosis. And the combination of this is it's like mental mechanics. We aren't broken, Blaine. A lot of us feel we are. And from our history, maybe with good reason, but we're not. It actually is a mechanical, simple process that we can do on ourselves too, to change and reduce or to eliminate our stresses and our anxieties, and even some of our, and the emotion, the painful emotion that goes with some of our traumas.
How quickly can they be learned?
A basic can be really learned. Simple. I mean, you get anxiety or you're getting nervous, you start tapping and you say, I feel nervous. Whatever this nervous is, I'm letting it go. I'm safe. It's safe to let it go. Whatever it is, I'm letting it go. It's safe to let it go. And then you take a deep breath, grab your wrist, hug it, and then blow it out and say peace. These are meridians. It's a combination of acupressure. And then the mind this is the memory reconsolidation, is that you're putting the nervous, but you're also interjecting the safe factor. It's not positive thinking, but you're interjecting something to interrupt the path of that thought, that transmitting that electrical thought. And by doing that, you'll notice that it brings it down. Whatever your anxiety, you check again. But then when you're done, you tap, take a deep breath, and then you think of something positive. You think of something really good that feels great, or you sing happy birthday to me, whatever. Just interrupt it with something great, and then go back and say, okay, how nervous am I? And do it again. Now that's the simple. And then for deeper, more, more pressing or issues that bring a lot of anxiety or pain, that it helps you to get guided with that for a little bit until you can do it on your own.
Do you do this yourself?
I do. It was the most remarkable thing that ever happened to me. I've done therapy, and then I did EFT, but when I was introduced to Robert's program, it was the first time my pores could breathe in my life. And that is just, I had arrived, and and it was so remarkable that I had to learn it and share it because I understand what suffering is.
And so how long have you been using this?
Well, I'm using his program 2 years, okay, for 2 years, but I was doing EFT before that. And I've also been the one to go to for the emotional support for a lot of people, businesses for years. So now I'm pulling it all together in a really, really, really remarkable way.
And you raise, again, another interesting point that people don't kind of realize that people starting or running their own business do need support, do need help, do need a backup. And there's very little opportunity to get that anywhere, And it's not something, I guess there are books on it, but, where do you get help from, or where do you find the help? And I guess that's one of the things you're doing now or trying to do.
Well, it all depends. Also, the same thing is businesses, when they need help, they get overwhelmed, as you said, as an example. Okay, so you help I can work to sort them out to what is the business, and then what is actually emotional, where is that coming from? And then how to address that. So a lot of times, like we're talking about doing simpler tasks, sorting that out simpler, but say they have grief and loss, and they're having a hard time functioning. It's really hard for them to move until they can get out of that state of mind. They're going in a state of mind. And that's the part where I can help them, all the way around. But even if they're just challenged with their business, they should go to a small business development center. Not maybe for the emotional side, they're not contracted for that, but they should reach out to a small business development center. There's 1,100 centers in the country, and they're federally and state funded.
And what's amazing, we always talked about it, was the fact that so many people don't know about them. It's like this secret.
Right.
It's not a secret, but once they find out about it. But let's talk a little bit then back to, Lorraine, some of the stuff you're doing. Help me with something else you're involved in, and you'll teach me about it. Memory, was it reconsolidation?
Right. The memory reconsolidation, it just helps it make it easier for people to understand the mechanics kind of the mind. And it's about if you interrupted, there was an experiment as an example, and every time they looked on the screen and they saw a blue box, they had a little electrode, and then they would feel a buzz, right? So now they knew and grew to expect that every time they saw that blue box, they would get this little buzz. So they would then generate anxiety, right? Now, if they knew that every time they saw a yellow circle that it wouldn't happen, okay, then they would get conditioned to that. And the idea is if you interject change little by little, change the blue box to a yellow circle, it will change the memory. The memory is just data. The memory is composed of, what you see, hear, feel, smell, taste, and it's just information. And if you feed it different, or interrupt and add new information in there, the memory will change. Now imagine when the memory changes, and it's not as painful or emotional, or the beliefs are changed with that by interjecting an interruption to that thought, and you put something positive or good feeling there, then it no longer impacts us the same
And so
way.
how do you, when you work with somebody, how do you teach them that, or how do you show them how to do that?
The first thing, is here's an example. If you close your eyes, could you imagine think of a taste of a lime or a lemon? Okay, really think about that. All right. And what happens inside your mouth? What do you feel? What do you notice?
Like a tingling or sensation.
Okay, but also but is it sweet?
Kind of like a bitter taste or a sour taste.
Okay, like bitter. Okay. Now you notice how you can taste. Can you taste it when you think about it?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, but it's not real. You don't have it.
Right.
Right? You don't have it. So that's the idea. But we recall things. So what we do is go recall something that's making us feel bad. We recall it, and then we interrupt and teach them how to do that. When that's similar, it's a very simple illustration is to say, let it go, think of something very good, or sing or tap our feet, and then go back. So just that simple, the physical adding all those other elements is interrupting that path. So if people do it by themselves, they say, I'm nervous about this test. It's safe to let it go. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. And then go back and check. Am I still as nervous? And remarkably, you'll say, not as much. And you keep doing it until you get it down, and then you're off. And that's a way for people to manage mechanically, not therapeutically, how we can manage our stress and coping. And then for bigger issues, it's better to help to get somebody to guide you to begin with.
I was going to ask you that. So from a business standpoint, how do I take this information and apply it like right away?
Okay, so for business, for those who are saying they feel they're not, why can't they compete? Why are they having problems with employees? Why, if they are, or their employees aren't able to sell, they're not able, and there's usually it's a thought, it's a belief, it's a program in there someplace of what gave them that lack of security or lack of confidence. And so by exploring that and asking some questions, they could use that and relieve some of the stress and anxiety that's burdening them and or their employees.
I love the name of what you're trying to do. You call it breakthrough living. It's just a perfect thing of what you do. If somebody wants to work with Lorraine Allen in breakthrough living, they can schedule a personal session. Are you doing this via Zoom yet, or will you eventually do it via Zoom?
I'm always doing it via Zoom.
Well, now you're always doing it, yeah. But is that how it's done primarily? That they contact you and then have a session like we're having?
Yes, I think the best first is to contact, and then we have a little chat first. Yeah, so they become more familiar, and I can introduce them and give them some example and demonstrate with them and see if they're comfortable. And then we would schedule a session together.
Via Zoom. So let's talk a little bit about then contacting Lorraine Allen. Best bet is website, Facebook. Yeah.
Well, the best bet is Lorraine Allen and Co. Matter of fact, I can do this with my name while we're talking here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Rename. I'll just put it there. Is Lorraine Allen and Co. And just email me. And then, don't you just love technology? Okay, there it is. Lorraine Allen and Co. like and company.
Right.
Or you can go to my my Facebook page, which is Breakthrough Living Now.
Okay.
And you can find there and post or message me there.
And I'll encourage folks, if they are watching the show or on Facebook Live or listening on the radio, that to get in touch with Lorraine, just to get that blog or the entries you post typically on Facebook. How often do you come out with those?
Usually once a week on an average. But they can get an idea of what I offer now on there.
And do you have a subscription to that at all? Do you have a mail thing on that, or is it just on Facebook?
It's on Facebook, but yes, if they email me, they can come on. I'll distribute it through there.
Okay.
They can just request, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. This is for anybody, not just business people.
Right, which
it's
is
for
great.
anybody.
So, like I said, I started reading them, and I said, "This is really good stuff." It's just very easy to read, but very pragmatic, which I really like. And like you said, I think it has applicability, the stuff we're talking about, to any situation. Give me another example. You gave one good example before of a little something that people could do. Give me another example, a little something people could do.
Mirror, mirror on the wall. I think that was my last one. It's time to love myself most of all. And a little exercise is because years ago, people asked, told me I should, you really have to love yourself first. And I'm like, all right. Okay. So, and from my history, it was very difficult to learn that. But little by little, go in the mirror and look at yourself and look in your eyes and notice. We were so critical about ourselves, so critical. And it only takes a second. Just look in the mirror, look in your eyes, and then start examining every part of your face and say what you like about it, or remember a memory with it. Even, I'm like me, my eyes go out. And from lazy eye, but I recall, and I don't like that. But at the same time, I had wonderful memories with my mother, trying to help straighten my eye and patch and all that. And that was a gift. So you learn to love yourself, and you say either that or high five yourself in the mirror. Learn to love ourselves. We teach people how to treat us, and if we want other people to see us, we want to see us first.
It's funny you say that, because people oftentimes don't do that. Like you said, that they're always worried about other people, but I guess they're not concerned about themselves enough.
Well, we're healthier when we recognize ourselves, but we're also taught, we're taught we're selfish or that's egotistical. It's not at all. It starts when we're born, and it's just other learned. But it is the place to love, is to start with us, and then we have that much more to give and share.
Where do you see this going, Lorraine, in terms of, I was kidding you before, but not really kidding you about the book or speaking or TED Talks. Where do you see this going from here?
As far as breakthrough living?
Yeah.
I think that's it. Just to have a community, just to know, to feed. I mean, I have the thing was going to be make peace with your past, a lot of the tapping with that. But breakthrough living really right now is likely a book, but mainly just to give tools and also to teach children. Things I teach are not difficult to teach children. And if we start early, to teach them how to manage and cope with life, because these are simple things, that if we teach them early, they'll be able to manage much better and be happier.
Well, it's funny you're saying these are simple things, but there are things, even talking on the air, that we never learn in school. We learn lots of stuff in school. We learn lots of history. We learn lots of, if you take business courses, you learn all that stuff. But you never know, you don't learn a lot of stuff, like you were saying, almost about, first of all, taking care of yourself. I don't think I've ever had a course in that, or anybody's even talked about that. And I guess that's kind of important if you run a business. You better learn to take care of yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Well, especially if you own the business and you're responsible to other people, and you're better for your community and your client base and your partners and your staff. If you're really in a business, the buck stops with you, but the whole culture starts with you.
And it's sad in a way. That's very oftentimes not thought about or dealt with. You care about everybody else, but don't care of yourself. And relate that to you saying it's important for children to learn this as well?
Oh, absolutely. Children, especially even more now today, they have technology and a distraction, and they're not taught how to cope and how to help manage. And there's these skills and some of these life skills because you begin to teach very early, and especially between and by high school, because a lot of parents don't know. And they don't know, so it's hard for them to teach. So
one of the things I always love about you, Lorraine, you always get me thinking in 27 different directions, And I'm thinking already, what a great seminar for you also to do this, not only for the adults, but do it at the same time with the children. Working, I don't know if you've done that yet, but that would seem to be a lot of fun to do, to work with both parents and their children at the same time. I don't know if you've done that yet.
Yeah. No, I think so. No, I totally agree with you. And that because, again, they don't know, because then they're taught, we're taught what we were taught by, and our parents knew only what they knew, right? So, and but a lot of stuff is out there, and there's so much out there. And that's why smaller doses is more apt, more consumable.
Lorraine Allen, again, once more, if people want to get in touch with you, best bet is to do what?
Email me, Lorraine Allen and Co, and company @gmail.com. And I have that here. And then, or visit at Breakthrough Living Now on Facebook. And you'll know it. There's a yellow and green sun logo on it.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you, Lorraine Allen, for being my guest the second half hour on the Blaines World Show. Also, Judith, Loniak, and Deb Love being my guest the first half hour. Also, to Amy Prisnash, my producer. Look forward to having you join me here next Wednesday at 9 a.m. here on WPVM LP 103.7 in Nashville, North Carolina. And you can also catch us on WPVMFM.org and watch us on the WPVM's Facebook page. Lorraine, I actually hope to see you sometime in person next couple of years. Speak to you soon, my friend.